Hello, uh, we move on to module 20 of the Applied Linguistics course, which is a part of the UGC program in Linguistics, e-Pathshala. The 20th module is about something that we have been talking about in various modules about errors, that how and why we should look at errors not as some kind of pathologies to be eradicated, not diagnose them as some kind of diseases for which we need some remedies, but try to see how errors are actually, and it is empirically proved again and again, that errors are actually stages in the process of learning and acquisition. Not only just stages, they are necessary stages. Acquisition does not take place unless what we mark round as red and then correct it in the margins and ask children to rewrite it 5 times, etc., which never leads to any positive results. Children learn when they are ready to learn. So can we really look at errors not as pathologies or as serious mistakes to be eliminated, but more positively as stages in the process of learning? So that largely is the burden of this module, and we will try to go through it in the next 15-20 minutes. One of the important issues is that, as my teacher, Professor Robert LePage, often used to say, that linguists have always set themselves up as teachers of language teachers. So linguists think that they know what is correct language, they know what is pure language. There could be nothing more. Nothing more false, nothing more untrue to characterize a linguist. A linguist is one who describes a language, who tries to understand the nature and structure of language. And now we can say who tries to understand the universal nature of the language faculty, the nature of the human language faculty. He is a linguist. Or certainly a linguist who tries to describe different aspects of the language. Does not matter whether it is worshipped as a goddess or it is so-called Creole or pidgin or khichdi spoken in a god-forsaken remote village or in a tribal area. It doesn't matter to a linguist. For him they are equal. But in spite of all this, linguists, since they know something about language, they have always set themselves up as teachers of language teachers, and they have tried to tell them what to do and what not to do. Now, the complexity of the language teaching enterprise is so high, because as we saw in earlier modules, there are sociological, psychological, political, classroom infrastructure factors involved. So what can one particular factor, that such as the structure and description of language, do in such a complex situation? So I think linguists should try to help the teacher rather than try to impose certain kind of theories about a pure and standard language on the teachers. But this obsession with language purity and standardization is as old as the standardization of languages. Certainly goes back to Panini, because Panini wrote the Ashtadhyayi partly for the reason, certainly one of the greatest grammars written, but I am told, I am not an authority on it, so better check on this, but I think it is also meant, or the various other grammars of Sanskrit were meant to decide, to prescribe the rules for purity of enunciation. How a particular structure, particular stanza or a particular shloka was to be pronounced. It was sort of encoded with its writing, with its grammar. Where is the rise, where is the fall, and what is wrong and what is right. And I mean, this enterprise goes on for centuries and centuries and has still not stopped. For example, in the Western world, the tradition was set up by people like John Locke. The dates are on your slide. The slide is in front of you on the screen. So John Locke in in the 17th, 18th century, James Harris also in the 18th century, Noah Webster in the 18th and the 19th century, Joseph Priestley also in the 18th and 19th century. So here are foundations of linguists setting themselves up as language teachers, and telling people what to do and insist on accuracy and correctness. It was with this purpose in mind that grammars and dictionaries were written, that here is the accurate pronunciation, here is the accurate meaning, and here is the accurate usage. This is what you should be doing. If some of you might know that the French Academy was set up in the 17th century, in I think 1637 to be exact, in France. And what was the purpose of setting up the French Academy? It is there even today. It sends circulars to the French schools to prescribe the accuracy and pronunciation of various expressions in French, or for example, the new words that happen to enter French. So what is the authoritative version of French vocabulary and grammar is provided by the French Academy in France. Even in 1932, grammar was defined as the art of speaking and writing correctly. Now, that's not what grammar is all about. And academies in the tradition of the French Academy followed all over the world. They mushroomed. There is one in India also. You will find all kinds of academies, of the Marathi language, of the Gujarati language, or certainly the Hindi cell, or the Kendriya Hindi Sansthan, or various other bodies that take it upon themselves to save the cause of the purity of Hindi language. The Constitution of India provides that contemporary Hindi will borrow words primarily from Sanskrit and only secondarily from other languages. It's written in our Constitution. And following that, the Supreme Court issued directions to NCERT and other bodies dealing with education that you better create textbooks which have items from Sanskrit rather than from Persian or Arabic. So many Persian words were eliminated from the rich vocabulary of Hindi. So a person like me, in my school days, knew the word tree because I started learning English. I knew vriksh, I knew taru, but I also knew ped, but I also knew darakht. But now my children and modern children, from their lexicon, darakht has been erased completely. And I think this is an unfortunate thing to happen. Rather than enriching your vocabulary, you sort of diminish it. And that is why I have said earlier in my earlier modules, earlier video presentations, that languages flourish in each other's company. They die, they suffocate when they are isolated from other languages. Please look at the slide in front of you on the computer about saving the purity of language, which is the burden, which is what many academies, so-called, following in the tradition of the French Academy, they take it upon themselves. So they think that they have to save their languages from all causes of corruption. Okay. They think that there might be an invasion of vocabulary from foreign languages, so they have to check that. As I just gave you an example, that it should be saved from technical terms from other languages, and it should certainly be saved from all kinds of slang. It should not become. And then the French Academy said those barbarous expressions it's on your screen. Those barbarous expressions which are constantly being created to satisfy the dubious needs of trade, industry, sports and advertising. Now, can you imagine? How can a language get rid of Pepsi Cola? How can a language get rid of Xerox? These are all words created in the service of the language, and they enrich the language. English language has happily borrowed the word samosa or sari or blouse or whatever. They are happy with pakka, kacha, the thousands of words which borrowed from Hindi or Sanskrit from into English language, and it is richer because of that. These people, people like Locke and Webster, and they went to the extent of saying, Webster, for example, is on record saying that Shakespeare, of all the people, Shakespeare was a man of little learning, that he didn't know his English well. And look at their obsession with shall and will. Earlier, all grammars used to teach you, I shall go and you will go. And a person who said, I will drown, nobody shall save me, he died. Because, you can't say, he should have said, I shall drown, nobody will save me. That might have saved him, but I mean, that kind of thing was prescribed in the grammar books. Consider the case of she walked to school every day. Consider this. Now, every teacher of English will put a circle around walk and say walks, without realizing, as I tried to explain earlier in one of the modules, without realizing that there is enormous pressure on the child to use walk rather than walks. Okay. And over a period of time, all of us learned walks, and we learned that sir that goes with walk is a marker of third person singular present tense. There is a whole lot of things to be learned there, and children learned it gradually. It's a cognitively very complex task, particularly in a second language, so it takes a while. Again, if you look at another example which we have, it's on your screen, and I think we have discussed this earlier also, that if you have to acquire in English language go, went, gone, the irregular forms of the word go, then in the first there are sort of three stages which are well attested by research in first language acquisition and in second language acquisition and in third language acquisition. That in the first stage, I think I discussed this earlier also, in the first stage children will say go, went, gone, but at that stage they do not see the connection between go, went, gone. Okay, they learn them as three independent lexical items, okay, as if they were three different words. Then in the second stage they learn the regular rule, which is add ed to the verb for the past tense, and then they learn the sort of paradigm go, goed, goed. Now every teacher will laugh at it, every linguist, every teacher trainer will laugh at it, but what I am trying to say is that this should be considered as a necessary stage in the process of learning, because it is evidence of learning and knowledge and not of ignorance and stupidity. So if somebody says go, 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 and in the final stage, of course, the child learns the irregular form with the awareness that the real rule is ed, but there are some forms like come, came, come, and go, went, gone, which are irregular. We discussed a dialogue earlier also, other one spoon, give me not the other spoon, but other one spoon. Remember? The father trying to teach, give me the other spoon, and he's saying other one spoon. Because for the child there is some category called one spoon and the other spoon and one. So other one spoon. He wants one spoon, but he wants the other spoon. And he will learn it in due course what is the correct order. Look at this dialogue on your screen. There is a dialogue on your screen which is comparable to that. In fact, two of them. My teacher holded the baby rabbits and patted them. Oh, did you say your teacher held the baby rabbits? Yes. What did you say? What did you say she did? She holded the baby rabbits and we patted them. Oh, did you say she held them tightly? No, she holded them loosely. So interesting, because she is at the stage 2. She knows ED. She's not ready to, learn the go, went, gone, or hold, held yet. So, you see, what we are saying is that there are a variety of ways in which you look, in which you can look at L2 learners' input. We have already discussed something like contrastive analysis, where you say that the errors in L2 are L1 dependent. Error analysis would say that some errors might be L1 dependent, but most errors might be L1 independent because they are made by all. They are sort of universal in character. And there are other ways of examining the L2 learners' output, approximative systems, which sort of sees the L2 learners' output in terms of, L1, L2A, L2B, L2C, and so on, till the time you get closer to the target. Or you have the concept of interlanguage, which calls the intermediate system as interlanguage. And once again, all these perspectives like intermediate language or coexistent systems, or for example approximative systems, or interlanguage, or the concept of transitional competence, they all are an effort to examine L2 learners' output in its own right, okay, rather than in terms of L1. So in the forthcoming modules, we will return to the various concepts which try to characterize L2 learners' output in different ways. We will certainly spend some time on the important concept of interlanguage, which I think is very useful for all applied linguists and for teacher trainers and for teachers. So we'll come back to this. Thank you very much.